some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for, and most of us don't like. From Virginia to California, we see stark examples of how radically, in some ways, the country has changed. Now, much of this is related to both illegal and, in some cases, legal immigration that, of course, progressives love.
And since this is the last speech that I will give as president, I think it's fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country which I love. It was stated best in a letter I received not long ago. A man wrote me and said, "You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American."
So nearly 30 years separate those moments, Joe, but, I mean, watching Ronald Reagan speak that way actually brings me to tears right now, especially seeing the way Laura Ingraham really tried to encapsulate her vision of America right before that. It is one beautiful outlook of how we have become this beautiful country versus something very trashy, very ugly, and very sad.
Well, Ronald Reagan is so uplifting because, as Ronald Reagan always, he had this beautiful talent to reconnect us with who we were, to remind us that about that dream that was and that is America. And even when we fall short, and we have fallen short so many times through the years, it's that dream. You know, the dream that all men, all women are created equal, and also that dream that you can go to France, but you can't become a Frenchman. You can go to Germany, but you can't become a German. You can come to America, and as General Hayden said, it's pretty simple. You read the document, you understand the document, you pledge allegiance to the document, and we shake your hand. And you are every bit as much of an American as me and other people who have been here for 400 years. Just like that. That's the magic of America. And guess what? No president, no radio talk show host, no white supremacist in Virginia can ever change that. You know, Guy Benson, a strong conservative voice, wrote this on Twitter overnight. As conservatives, we should not fear or bemoan demographically shifting electorate. It's our task to make our cause relevant and accessible to more people, including those who may not initially be natural allies, and make them secure in the confidence that our ideas are better. And you know, John Meacham, I remember in 1999, George W. Bush, a man who I disagreed with many of George W. Bush's policies, with his spending. George W. Bush quietly and publicly told Republicans in no uncertain terms, I'm running in 2000, and one of the major focuses of my major focuses will be to reawaken the Republican Party to the importance to reaching out to those who may not be just like us, to Hispanics especially, the largest growing demographic group in America. We have got to put this nativism behind us, this soft bigotry, as they would,
white supremacy,
they would call us, which is looking more and more like white supremacy these days. And George W. Bush, in his reelection bid, got what, 44% of the Hispanic vote, because he did what Guy Benson said conservatives today need to do: make their views accessible and relevant.
And you look at just as recently as John McCain, who manages to, remember he says when a questioner, probably the kind of questioner that Laura was talking about, who's not happy with the way the country is changing, he says he's, Obama's a Muslim, and McCain shuts, quite courageously, shuts the woman down in 2008. 2012, Governor Romney, a figure who his dad was born in Mexico because he was a part of the Mormon missionary family. It was just an internationalist view. It was a party that, for all of its faults, and all institutions on this side of paradise are flawed, for all of its faults, it was about that Reagan-esque vision of all the pilgrims from all the lost places hurtling through the darkness toward home. And that is in such extreme distress now that people who have been Republicans for longer than 30 minutes, seems to me, need to fight for that part of their party or say goodbye for a very long time.
We have Susan Del Percio, Donnie Deutsch, and Gene Robinson with us as well. And we'll stay on the spirit of this discussion, Willie Geist. Michael Gerson has a really good piece out in the Washington Post about the politics at play, and then we'll get to some stunning new details pertaining some of the court proceedings with migrant children and families seeking asylum. But first, Willie, the politics at play.
Yeah, speaking of George W. Bush, Michael Gerson was a speechwriter and a senior advisor to President Bush during both of his terms, and Gerson has a new column on this topic in the Washington Post titled, "The Only Way to Save the GOP is to Defeat It." In it, Michael writes, in November, many Republican leaners and independents will face a difficult decision. The National Democratic Party under Nancy Pelosi and Charles E. Schumer doesn't share their views or values, but President Trump is a rolling disaster of mendacity, corruption, and prejudice. What should they do? They should vote Democratic in their House race, no matter who the Democrats put forward, and they should vote Republican in Senate races with mainstream candidates, unlike, say, Corey Stewart in Virginia. Why vote strategically in this case? Because American politics is in the midst of an emergency. If Democrats gain control of the House but not the Senate, they will be a check on the president without becoming a threat to his best policies from a Republican perspective, or able to enact their worst policies. The tax cut will stand, the Senate will still approve conservative judges, but the House will conduct real oversight hearings and expose both Russian influence and administration corruption. Under Republican control, important committees, such as Chairman Devin Nunes's House Intelligence Committee, have become scraping, sniveling, panting, and pathetic tools of the executive branch. Only Democratic control can drain this particular swamp. Susan Del Percio, you've worked in Republican politics for a long time. What do you make of Gerson's take in this moment?
Well, it's hard to hear, and I'm a little torn about it because I do think you should vote for who you think is the best candidate. Playing the strategic voting game is always a little difficult. It typically doesn't work out the way you want it. So I think if there are Republicans who you can support as a Republican, you should vote for them. Why should you vote for a lesser candidate if you don't think that they're up for the challenge? So that's my first point. The second point is that if you feel that a Republican for Congress, especially in the House, has been an enabler of Donald Trump, don't vote for them. It doesn't mean you have to vote for the Democrat, but it means you shouldn't vote for an enabler of Donald Trump.
Joe, what do you think?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's very difficult. I remember in Gene Robinson in 2006, I remember writing a column making the same argument along with Christopher Buckley and other Republicans who said there has to be checks on, and we're talking about George W. Bush, but on an administration that mishandled Iraq, that was talking about exporting democracy to ending tyranny on all four corners of the globe through the United States military, which was already overstretched. We were post-Katrina. But there was this feeling that there had to be a check. There are times that you have to vote strategically. And it would be different if the legislative branch were actually an independent, functioning branch of this government, of Madison's brilliant design of a government of checks and balances. But as we've been saying here all year, Gene, the founding fathers, they foresaw a corrupt, tyrannical president. They never foresaw an obsequious Congress, legislative branch, that would lie down and simply rubber stamp all of the worst proposals of a tyrannical president. And whatever you want to define Donald Trump, he is not Madison and Jefferson and Franklin and Washington's idea of a president.
No, no, he's clearly not. And, you know, I think the founders would be shocked that Congress hasn't acted not just to investigate this president, but probably to impeach this president. Remember, they were revolutionaries, and they absolutely specifically planned for this sort of moment. And this Congress is beyond negligent. It's beyond it's beyond pathetic, really. I think it's a crime against the Constitution that they're not fulfilling their duty even to investigate. They're protecting the president from exposure of his corruption. They're enabling this president who, and let's be certain what the contrast is. You heard that Laura Ingraham quote. I mean, that's let's not say that sounds like white supremacy or smells like it. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is, pure and simple. And this is a president who is encouraging that, and to say nothing of all the other things that this president does that are just beyond the pale. So I agree with Mike Gerson and George F. Will. Vote Democratic.
Yeah. Michael Gerson mentioned Corey Stewart in his piece. Stewart is the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in Virginia and is responding after a video surfaced from his 2017 Virginia governor campaign in which he praised the Confederacy for rebelling against the Union.
This is the state of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and James Monroe. It's the state of the founders. It's the state of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. But it's also the state of Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson and J.E.B. Stewart.
Yeah.
Because at the base of it, Virginians, we think for ourselves.
Yeah.
And if the established order is wrong, we rebel.
Amen.
We did that in the Revolution. We did it in the Civil War. And we're doing it today.
Stewart, who grew up in Minnesota and moved to...
Of course he did, by the way.
And moved
of course
to
he grew up
Virginia
in Minnesota.
in his
They're always the worst.
late 20s.
Transplants saying, hey, I'm a rebel.
Is facing incumbent Democrat Tim Kaine this November. Stewart responded to the video by telling CNN, quote, unlike wimpy Tim Kaine, really, Virginians have a warrior spirit and a rebel heart. And in a tweet yesterday that Stewart has since deleted, he attacked Michigan Democratic candidate for governor Abdul El-Sayed as a, quote, ISIS commie.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Stewart,
These people.
Yeah.
They're
where's he coming from? He goes to Minnesota, and he's trying to play tough Southern boy.
Minnesotans are usually nice people.
Yeah, I know. He's not, but he should go back instead of trying to play the role of tough Southerner. Hey, John Meacham.
Lord, yeah.
I don't know where to start, except, unfortunately, you can find far too many examples of these sort of posers. This guy posing as a Southerner, as a son of the Confederacy. But all of this talk, from Laura Ingraham to Corey Stewart, overlooks one small detail of American history, that many Americans said the same ignorant thing hundreds of years ago and 150 years ago when the Irish came. They said the same ignorant things when the Germans came. They said the same ignorant things when the Italians came to America. There have been a small segment of know-nothings who have been saying ignorant things about immigrants coming to this country for over 240 years. And yet, you know, I ticked off a list a couple of days ago of immigrants, their families that came recently and transformed Silicon Valley. If we had Donald Trump and Corey Stewart's view of America, then you wouldn't have had Steve Jobs over here. You wouldn't have had the founder of Google over here, the founder of Yahoo over here, the founder of Reddit over here, the founder of eBay over here. I mean, and if we want to go back a few years, even Albert Einstein may have ended up in a Nazi concentration camp with Donald Trump's viewpoint on immigration.
Yeah. It's extraordinary that we're still having this conversation in 2018, but we're going to have to keep having it again and again. The talk about the Confederacy and the talk about secession as a successor to the revolution, I find as a Southerner abhorrent. The South, the Civil War, let's just say it quickly here, was about the institution of slavery. It was about the perpetuation of that institution. It was a struggle to end the journey enshrined in the preamble to the Constitution toward a more perfect union. Those soldiers took up arms against the Constitution of the United States and would have ended the great American experiment that led to, say, victory in World War II. That led to, say, victory over Soviet communism in the deadliest potential struggle in human history over the 40 years or more of the Cold War. It was, and if anyone who doubts that, and start tweeting, you know, we can talk about this for the rest of the year, but that's what it was about. And when people try to appropriate it, and we're approaching, this is the weekend of the anniversary of the terrible violence in Charlottesville, where the President of the United States, 1 year ago, you may remember, had a hard time figuring out which side of the argument he was on, neo-Nazis and Klansmen, or the people who were standing up for the America you just described. And that is one of the many reasons we have a crisis in the moral leadership of the country.
And Donnie Deutsch, the hypocrisy, of course, as always, when it comes to Donald Trump, is just staggering. Here, this guy has been fighting against chain migration.
Oh, my God.
This is the most evil thing of all time. You know, with chain migration, what happens is you bring in MS-13 and they're going to come in and they're going to shoot up your white neighborhood and go to your white malls and shoot up your white malls, and they're going to go to your white high schools and shoot up your white high. You know, of course, as we've said before, MS-13 accounts for far less than 1% of the illegal immigrants that come to this country. But chain migration must end now,
my Lord,
writes Donald Trump, except for the fact, Donnie, his in-laws have been trying to get into the country on chain migration. And yesterday, Melania Trump's parents became U.S. citizens through
how does he miss that?
The same chain migration route that Donald Trump has been demonizing for a year now.
Yeah. Of course, there's the rules for all of us, and then there's rules for Donald Trump. And this is, I mean, the hypocrisy is not even there needs to be a new word beyond hypocrisy to describe that. You know, going back to the Laura Ingraham thing, and the thing is that Laura Ingraham must be on some cable access to get on the air, actually get on and say that. Oh, wait, no, wait, she's on Fox. She's on a major network and says that basically make America white again. Her whole argument, beyond being reprehensible and completely counter to what we're about, is also false in the sense of that our shifting demographics has very little to do with immigration. And the reality is actually, as of 2007, every year, babies being born in this country, whites now are the minority. It's happening in this country. It's not about, oh, people are pouring on the borders as we speak. It's who we are now. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, nor should we put the genie back. That's who we are. And, you know, Donald Trump, once and for all, we need to just really look at what his slogan, Make America Great Again, means. We know what it means. We know what it meant. Make America white again. And that's what that slogan always was. The dog whistle was there. And the fact that now, 18 months into his presidency, that we have people like Laura Ingraham just blatantly, as Gene said, there's no soft here, bigoted, racist comments. Guys, whether you like it or not, we are a mosaic. It's not changing. It's who we are. And even if you built the wall, which is not going to happen, it's who we are, and thank God it's who we are.
Well, and Alex, if you can get that Ronald Reagan clip again that we started the block with, we'll get it to end the block. Because there are a lot of conservatives that have claimed to be disciples of Ronald Reagan. And this has actually been happening for years now. Actually, people run around quoting Ronald Reagan, and temperamentally, ideologically, in every way possible, they are, in fact, the antithesis of Ronald Reagan and are against everything Ronald Reagan stood for. And you certainly could talk about big government, the fact that these so-called conservatives in Congress, along with Donald Trump, have passed the largest spending bill ever, have the largest federal debt ever, exploded the deficit, the yearly deficit, have been more fiscally irresponsible than any Congress in U.S. history. And yet, they still claim the mantle of Reagan while they're being demagogues. Do we have that Reagan clip, Alex, that we can run? I'll tell you what, Mika, why don't we go out to break on it, and I'll just tell all my conservative friends, take a good, close look at what Ronald Reagan said, because it's very telling. He didn't say this in like June of 1986. This was his farewell speech to America. Still ahead on Morning Joe, what do we have, Mika?
Well, we'll tell you about a mother and a daughter deported to El Salvador, but a judge steps in and orders the plane to be turned around. That story's coming up. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
And here's Reagan.
And since this is the last speech that I will give as president, I think it's fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country which I love. It was stated best in a letter I received not long ago. A man wrote me and said, "You can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American."
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.